The sun had just started its slow fall behind the hills of Dakota Ridge, painting the sky in strokes of copper and rose. The wind carried whispers of wheat, brushing together, and the faint rhythm of a horse's hooves in the distance. She stood by the old barn fence, her hands resting on the weathered wood, eyes lost somewhere between longing and fear. Her name was Clara, the kind of woman the prairie remembered, quiet, stubborn, and endlessly waiting for something she couldn't name. When she heard the horse stop behind her, she didn't turn. She already knew who it was. No one else rode that slow, deliberate way, as if each step of his horse was a thought he hadn't yet spoken. Cole Harper, the man the town whispered about, the man who carried both silence and sin in his shadow. "You're late," she said softly, not out of anger, but as if she had been counting the seconds since sunrise. "I didn't promise I'd be on time," he replied, his voice low, steady, like the hum of a storm before it breaks. She turned then, meeting his eyes. Dust clung to his boots, the sun framed him like an old photograph, and for a moment, the world around them stilled. "I heard you might be leaving," he said, his gaze not quite meeting hers. "I thought about it," Clara answered, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. "But thinking doesn't always mean going." Cole nodded, his jaw tightening. He'd seen her strong before, when she faced drought, loss, and loneliness without breaking. But tonight, she looked fragile, like a candle in the wind pretending not to tremble. "Why do you stay?" he asked quietly. "Maybe I'm waiting for something to change." Cole took one step closer, then another. The air between them thickened with everything they'd never said. His hand almost reached hers, then stopped, the distance between their fingertips heavy with history. "Clara," he whispered. She looked up, her eyes soft but sure. "You can hurt me if you want," she said, her voice barely a breath. "But don't walk away this time." He looked at her for a long moment, every word she'd ever said to him echoing in the spaces he couldn't fill. Then, slowly, he reached for her hand, and as the prairie darkened into night, the world outside them disappeared, leaving only the quiet sound of two hearts, trying to remember how to beat in the same rhythm again. The night came quietly, wrapping the prairie in a velvet hush. Stars spilled across the sky like secrets too bright to stay hidden. Clara leaned against the barn door, the rough wood pressing against her back, and watched Cole as he untied his horse. Every move he made was careful, as if the silence itself might break if he wasn't gentle enough. "You always look like you're about to leave," she murmured. He paused, his hand resting on the saddle horn. "And you always look like you're waiting for me not to." A faint smile tugged at her lips. Maybe we're both fools then. Cole's hat shadowed his eyes, but she could still feel his gaze. He stepped closer, boots crunching over dry earth, until the scent of dust and leather filled the air between them. "Didn't figure I'd find a reason to stop." "And now?" she asked. He looked up at the stars, then at her. "Now I'm not so sure I can keep going without looking back." The confession hung there, fragile and fierce. Clara felt something break loose inside her chest, not pain, not relief, but the dangerous warmth of hope. She pushed off the barn door, stepping close enough to feel the heat of him, to see the faint tremor in his jaw. Then stop running, Cole, she whispered, just for tonight. But her eyes steady, patient, filled with the kind of faith he'd never earned pulled him closer. His hands found her waist, rough palms tracing the shape of someone he thought he'd lost long ago. Clara's breath caught, her fingers brushing his chest where his heartbeat thudded steady and real. "You don't have to promise me forever," she said. "Just don't disappear before morning." Cole nodded, a small, helpless sound caught in his throat. "I can give you that," he said. The wind rose, stirring the grass and the dust, wrapping around them like a ghost of the day that had just died. Somewhere, a coyote called, lonely and wild. But in that quiet space, under the whispering sky, they found something that felt almost like peace. Clara closed her eyes, resting her forehead against his chest. The rhythm of his heart steadied her breathing, and for a moment she believed the night might hold them safe. And in that stillness, where past and future waited at the edge of dawn, both knew this was only the beginning of a story neither of them could walk away from. The first light of dawn crept across the prairie, soft and golden, spilling over the barn roof and touching the dust with fire. The world felt new, fragile, and half awake, as if it were holding its breath. afraid to disturb what the night had given. Clara stirred first, her eyes opening to the pale blue of morning and the quiet warmth of Cole's arm draped loosely around her. For a moment, she didn't move. She just listened to the heartbeat against her back, the soft whicker of his horse nearby, and the sigh of wind moving through the wheat. When Cole finally shifted, the boards beneath them creaked in protest. "You awake?" he asked, voice rough with sleep. "Been awake a while," she whispered. Didn't want to break the quiet. He smiled faintly, his hand brushing a stray lock of her hair. "You make it sound like quiet's something sacred." "It is," she replied, "at least between two people who've forgotten how to find it." The moment felt fragile, like a glass thread stretched between the past and whatever came next. Cole looked at her, memorizing the way the sun touched her face, how her eyes caught the light like pieces of amber. He wanted to say something real and lasting, but the words tangled in his throat. "You're thinking about leaving again," she said softly, not accusing, just knowing. He hesitated. "I told you last night I'd stay till morning. And now it's morning," she said, her voice trembling. Cole looked down at his hands, scarred and worn, the hands of a man who'd built and broken more things than he could count. "I don't know how to belong anywhere, Clara," he admitted. "Every time I stop, the road starts calling." Clara reached for his hand, threading her fingers through his. "Then maybe it's not about belonging," she said. "Maybe it's about choosing." The simplicity of her words hit him harder than any truth he'd faced before. The wind picked up, carrying with it the scent of sage and dust, the smell of every mile he'd ever ridden away from something good. He closed his eyes, the battle inside him old and familiar. Finally, he looked at her and said quietly, "You deserve better than a man who can't promise he'll stay." She smiled, not out of sadness, but with a kind of quiet strength. "Maybe I don't need a promise, Cole. Maybe I just need a reason." And as the sun lifted higher, their shadows stretched long across the barn floor, two souls standing between what was safe and what was real. The sun had fully risen now, flooding the prairie in light that made every shadow honest. Cole stood outside the barn, tightening the saddle straps on his horse, her arms folded against the chill that had nothing to do with the wind. She wanted to stop him, to ask him to stay, to fight for something that had barely begun, but she knew words weren't. What held men like Cole? It was silence. It was the things they couldn't say. "You're really going?" she asked quietly. He looked up, his face lined with something deeper than age. "If I stay, I'll only bring the past with me." She stepped closer, her voice trembling. "And if you go, you'll carry me with it." For a heartbeat, neither moved. The prairie stretched wide around them, endless and merciless. Cole swallowed hard, turning his hat in his hands like a confession. "You make it sound simple," he said. "It is simple," she replied. "It's just not easy." He looked at her then, really looked, the way a man looks at something he knows he'll never forget. The sunlight caught in her hair, gold and wild, and for the first time, he thought maybe home wasn't a place but a person. "I don't know how to love right," he admitted. Clara smiled softly. "Then don't, just love honest." The words broke something open inside him. He took a slow step forward, then another, until he was close enough to smell the faint sweetness of her hair, to feel the warmth of her breath on his neck. He cupped her face in his rough hands, the kind of touch that trembled with both fear and faith. "I'll come back," he said, his voice breaking, "when I've got something worth giving." Her eyes shimmered, but she didn't cry. "You already do, Cole. You just don't see it yet." He pressed his forehead against hers, and for one last, unmeasured moment, they breathed the same air, hearts thudding in quiet defiance of the world. Then, with a reluctant step, he turned away and mounted his horse. As he rode off toward the horizon, the dust rose behind him like smoke from a dying fire. Clara watched until he was nothing but a shadow against the sun, her heart both breaking and steady, because she knew he'd left, but something of him would always stay. When the wind finally stilled, she whispered to the empty fields, "I'll be here." And though no one heard it but the prairie itself, the land seemed to carry her voice farther than she could see, a promise, a prayer, and a story that didn't end with goodbye.